Everybody's backing us up!
That's the essence of Pikachu and Dad!
Thunderbolt, let's go!
When you think about what makes a Pokemon move good, you probably think of a few things. Power accuracy, maybe a cool secondary effect like flinching or burning the opponent. But have you ever stopped and thought about the opposite? What makes a Pokemon move truly useless? Not just bad, not just forgettable, but genuinely the single most pointless move to ever exist in the entire franchise. Because with over 900 moves, spanning 9 generations, and nearly 3 decades of game design, there has to be one move that sits at the absolute rock bottom of the barrel. And today, that's exactly what we're going to figure out. We're going to go through the worst of the worst, the most pathetic, most baffling, most offensively useless moves in Pokemon history, and by the end of this video, we're going to crown one single move as the undisputed most useless move of all time. Now, before we get into the real contenders, let's get the obvious one out of the way. Splash. Everybody knows Splash. It does nothing. Literally. The description says the user just splashes around with no effect. And for the longest time, that's all it was, a meme, a joke move given to Magikarp to reinforce just how pathetic it was. But here's the thing. Splash isn't actually as useless as you think anymore, because in Generation 7 they added Z moves, and Z Splash raises your attack by 3 stages, which is honestly kind of insane. That's more than a Swords Dance. So in a weird twist of fate, the move that was supposed to be the poster child of uselessness actually found a legitimate competitive niche for a brief moment. Sure, Z moves are gone now, but the fact that Splash had a moment in the sun at all already disqualifies it from the title of most useless. The same goes for Teleport, which was completely worthless in trainer battles for 6 generations straight, until Gen 8 turned it into a -6 priority switching move, making it one of the best pivoting tools in competitive play. Sometimes Game Freak actually remembers these things. So if Splash and Teleport are out, then who's actually in the running? Well, let's start with the moves that are bad in the most straightforward way possible. They're attacking moves that are just terrible at attacking. Constrict is a normal type move with a base power of 10. Yeah, 10, not 100. Just 10 with a generous 10% chance to lower the opponent's speed for 7 consecutive generations. This was the weakest attacking move in the entire game. The only Pokemon that really learned it were things like Tentacool and Lickitung, who obviously had much better options. And in Generation 8, Game Freak finally pulled the plug on it. Honestly, the only surprising thing about Constrict is that it lasted as long as it did. But at least Constrict does damage, even if that damage is laughable. The same can't be said for some other moves. Let's talk about the gimmick moves, because this is where things start to get really questionable, starting with Flower Shield, a fairy-type status move introduced in Gen 6 that raises the defense of all grass-type Pokemon on the field. And I do mean all, including your opponents. So unless you're running some kind of monotype grass team, you're either doing absolutely nothing or actively helping the enemy, and the 2 Pokemon that can learn it. Comfey and Cherrim. Well, Cherrim is barely remembered by anyone, and Comfey isn't even a grass type. So Flower Shield is essentially a move that helps Pokemon that can't even learn it. Yeah, that's pretty bad. But then there's Ion Deluge, an electric type move that turns all normal type moves into electric type moves for that single turn. I genuinely cannot figure out a scenario where this is useful. Maybe if your ally in a double battle is using Hyper Beam and you want it to be an electric type Hyper Beam for some reason. But at that point, why wouldn't you just use an electric type move in the first place? It's a move that requires such an absurdly specific setup to do anything at all that I'm convinced it only exists because someone at Game Freak thought the concept was cool without ever testing whether it was practical. Now, while we're on the topic of double battle moves, I have to mention Hold Hands. Yes, this is a real move introduced in Generation 6 as an event exclusive. And what does it do? Well, the user and its ally hold hands, and that's it. No stat boost, no healing, no secondary effect, nothing. And unlike Splash, which at least got a Z move, Buff Hold Hands never received anything to justify its existence. It's Splash, but somehow even less useful, because at least Splash can be used in a single battle. Hold Hands literally requires a partner to do nothing with you. And speaking of moves that actively betray you, let's move on to a move that I think is one of the worst designed attacks in the entire series. Synchronoise. At first glance, it looks amazing. 120 base power, 100 accuracy psychic type. That's incredible, right? Well, there's a small problem. This move only deals damage if the opponent shares a type with the user. So if you're a psychic type using Synchronoise, you can only hit other psychic types who resist the move. You can't hit dark types at all because they're immune to psychic, and most of the Pokemon that learn Synchronoise are pure psychic types or normal types, meaning it either deals resisted damage or literally nothing. And on normal types like Exploud, forget it, you can't even touch ghost types. The move has all of these beautiful stats, but its entire gimmick makes it functionally worse than almost any other attacking option. It's like being handed a sports car with no wheels. Now let's get into the 2-turn moves, because Gen 1 Game Freak had this weird obsession with making moves that require you to sit there and do nothing for an entire turn before attacking. Skull Bash is 130 base power, and it does raise your defense while charging, but you're still giving your opponent a completely free turn to either set up switch out or just knock you out before you even get to attack. But at least Skull Bash has that defense boost. Razor Wind doesn't even have that luxury. It's an 80 base power normal type move that takes 2 turns, has a high crit rate, and in generations 1 and 2, it only had a 75% accuracy. Yeah, you charge up for a turn doing nothing, and then you have a 1 in 4 chance of missing entirely on the attack that you waited for. The worst part is it's a normal type move, which means it doesn't even hit anything super effectively, so you're waiting 2 turns for neutral damage at best. That is, if it hits at all. Game Freak eventually boosted its accuracy to 100 in Gen 3, but by that point, the damage was done. Nobody was going to suddenly start using an 80 power 2-turn normal move in a world where return existed. Razor Wind was rightfully removed in Gen 8, and I doubt anyone shed a tear. While we're in Gen 1 territory, I want to bring up another fossil from the bottom of the bin barrage, yet another multi-hit normal type move, just like Double Slap and Fury Attack. But the kicker is that it's only ever been learned by 2 Pokemon, Exeggcute and Exeggutor, neither of which are normal types, and both of which have much higher special attack than physical attack. So even in its best case scenario, Barrage is a physical, normal type multi-hit move on a Pokemon that would much rather be using Bullet Seed or Psychic, and just like Razor Wind Game, Freak removed it in Gen 8. But here's what gets me. Exeggcute was still in Sword and Shield. They just didn't give it Barrage anymore. Which basically means Game Freak themselves looked at this move and said, you know what, you're better off without it, that's got to sting. But we're getting close to the bottom now, and I want to talk about 2 moves that I think are the strongest candidates for our title. The first is one of the most notorious moves in the history of competitive Pokemon. Not because it's good, but because it was broken in the worst possible way. Focus Energy in Generation 1 was supposed to multiply your critical hit rate, making it a fantastic setup. Move the problem, a programming bug caused it to divide your critical hit rate by 4 instead of multiplying it. So by using Focus Energy, you were actively sabotaging yourself. The move that was designed to help you land critical hits was mathematically ensuring that you would land fewer of them, and the worst part is that thousands of kids in 1998 used this move thinking they were getting an edge in battle, when in reality they were throwing matches. This might be the only move in Pokemon history where using it made you objectively worse off than doing nothing at all. Now Game Freak did fix this in Gen 2, and Focus Energy has actually become a decent move in later generations. But that Gen 1 version, that's historically the most damaging move in the game, literally. Before we get to our winner though, I want to give a dishonorable mention to a few signature moves that really let their Pokemon down. Octazooka is Octillery's signature move with a pathetic 65 base power and 85% accuracy on a Pokemon that already struggles to justify a team slot. Inferno has 100 base power and a guaranteed burn, which sounds great until you see that 50% accuracy, which means half the time you're just standing there accomplishing nothing. And then there's Crush Grip, Regigigas's signature move, which would actually be decent if Regigigas wasn't crippled by slow start for the first 5 turns, making this high power move hit like a gentle breeze. I've talked about all of these before in previous videos, but they deserve to be mentioned here even if they're not the worst. They're a reminder that being somebody's signature move doesn't save you from being terrible. And then there's our final contender, the move I believe takes the crown as the single most useless move of all time, Bestow. It's a normal type status move introduced in Gen 5, and what it does is give your held item to the opponent. That's it? You lose your item, and the opponent gets it for free. No swap, no exchange, no trick where you at least take their item in return. You just hand over your leftovers or choice band or whatever you're holding and receive absolutely nothing in return. Now you might think, okay, maybe there's some niche strategy where you give the opponent a bad item, except Bestow fails entirely if the opponent is already holding an item, which in competitive play, they almost always are, so it can't even function as a discount trick. And here's the thing that really seals it for me. Every other move on this list has some kind of excuse, splashes of flavor, move for Magikarp focus. Energy was broken by a bug, but at least it was trying to do something good. Razor Wind is from an era where Game Freak was still figuring things out, but Bestow. There's no excuse. It was introduced in Generation 5, by which point Game Freak had over a decade of game design experience, and they made a move whose intended purpose is to weaken yourself. It's not a gimmick move. It's not broken by a bug. It functions exactly as designed. And what it's designed to do is make you worse. It's the anti-move, a move that punishes you for using it. It doesn't deal damage, it doesn't help your team, it doesn't set up any strategy. It exists solely to transfer your own advantage to your opponent. And to add the final insult, it was removed in Generation 8, meaning that even Game Freak eventually looked at Bestow and said, yeah, we don't know why this exists either. So there it is, after going through the weakest, the most broken, the most nonsensical, and the most counterproductive moves in the franchise, I'm giving the crown to Bestow as Pokemon's most useless move of all time. A move that asks you one simple question, do you want to lose? And if your answer is yes, then congratulations, you've found your move. But you know, thinking about it, there's something almost admirable about a move. Like Bestow in a game where every Pokemon, every item, every strategy is designed to give you an edge. Bestow is the one move that says, no. Actually, I think your opponent could use this more than you. And maybe that's a lesson in itself. Sometimes the things that seem the most useless, the most backwards, the most counterintuitive aren't really mistakes at all. They're just ahead of their time, waiting for someone to find a purpose for them that nobody else thought of. And sure, nobody has found a purpose for Bestow yet. And honestly, they probably never will. But in a franchise that has taught us over and over again that even the most pathetic Magikarp can become something great, I think it's only fair to at least give it the benefit of the doubt. Or not, it's Bestow, come on.